Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you. Several years ago, we started in the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations an in-depth study of the Social Security disability system. And we started that because what looks like the trust fund now is less than 15 months till those with true disabilities are going to see a reduction in the payments that they get from the disability trust fund. And we looked at both the manner, the method, and the lack of oversight that Congress has had over the last 30 years over this program. And what we found were some significant flaws, both in the management and evaluation. We saw a significant delay in bringing the factors with which you would make this decision up to date, and I'm talking about the vocational grid program. What we know is 1 in 17 Americans today collect a disability check through the Social Security system. And for those that are truly disabled, their ability to survive on not a great amount of money is going to be further limited if, in fact, we don't make some rather significant changes. Interestingly enough, our committee looked at 300 randomly selected by Social Security cases from 3 different offices throughout the country. One of those was Oklahoma City. I asked to have one in Oklahoma done so we would have the pressure to not be biased against the system, but yet see a reflection of what happens in Oklahoma as well. And through that assessment, we found that 25% of the cases at the ALJ level were decided inappropriately. To be noted that Social Security's own internal assessment is at 22%. So we weren't far off, and we weren't aware of that at the time. So there's a large agreement both by Social Security Administration and the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations in the Senate, Government Affairs Committee, that we have a real problem. The problem is manifest in several ways. One is because of the extreme backlog, the requirements placed on ALJs to try to hit 500 to 700 cases a year is really an impossibility to do it properly. 2, the default position is to approve rather than to find the facts. And it's to approve because it's much easier and quicker to write a approving decision than it is a disapproval decision. The average case has over 600 pages in it. So if you think about what a judge would have to do to actually truly look at the whole case, the whole file, you can see that doing 700 cases a year and doing it well is an impossibility. The second thing we found is the judges actually changing dates of disability so they could use the grid, so they could get a case out, when in fact they would change the date at which an injury occurred so they could utilize the grid, so they wouldn't have to make a determination. The other thing we found, and we can't comment to a great extent now because it's going to the Justice Department for prosecution, is a tremendous amount of collusion between some ALJs and lawyers representing claimants. And you'll see that come out in the future. But pretty significant malfeasance in that area. And it's understandable because of the economic benefits to those that are representing those individuals who may, in fact, not be disabled, but in fact, the economic benefit for those representing those that are not, in fact, disabled inures to those that are representing them. Finally, the significant decisions within Social Security to abandon the use of well-proven and well-recognized standards in the medical community to diagnose and ascertain malingering have been eliminated from ALJs. For example, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Test, which is something physicians use all the time, It's a well-known standard in the disability community as well as in the medical community. Within the last 2 years, that no longer is a tool available to ALJs. So the bias has shifted. The other points I would make for your consideration as you look at this is continuing disability review is a joke. It's not happening to any significant extent. And then the final point I would make is we need to reform the process. We have great people working in Social Security. They actually know their job. They actually read all the data, and they make a determination about whether somebody is disabled or not. When somebody comes before an ALJ, they've already been denied 2 times by professionals at Social Security who actually have looked at all the data. And so when you have a nationwide approval rate of 60% after that, you have to ask yourself why. And the real answer is that ALJs don't look at all the information. And that there's nobody representing the taxpayer, i.e. Social Security, in the courtroom to present the other side of the case. So you have a finder of fact and an ALJ, you have a claimant and their attorney, but you have nobody representing Social Security who's actually gone through the file twice to look at it. We also have a significant number of problems with gaming the system where lawyers withhold real information and buy through the medical community the result they want. And I'll just give you an anecdote. When I first went into medical practice, I had a very well-known lawyer in my hometown send me a candidate that he was representing before an ALJ. And I used the guideline book to assess the candidate, and the candidate was not disabled. I got a call after that from the attorney saying he could never refer any patients to me again because I didn't find his patient disabled. So it tells you the bias is not to find fact, the bias is to find disability. And what we need to do is rebalance that. And I'd leave you with a final thought, is we all know people who are truly disabled. And we have a system that's designed to really help them. That system now has been put at risk, and the amount of money those individuals will collect 2 years from now, if we don't reform this, will be significantly less. We cannot move money. We do not have the capability to move money to this trust fund. Nor do we have the ability to draw money and borrow money for this trust fund. So what will happen is about 17 months from now, people who are collecting a disability check are going to get a much smaller check. So the very people in the disability community who are worried about us reforming this, when they really think about it, what they really want us to do is truly reform it so that the people who are truly disabled. Last anecdotal story. Oklahoma had a significant winter ice storm about 5 years ago. And in my home, which is loaded with trees, I lost big trees, snapped and everything else. And I made an agreement with an individual to come and clear those trees, trim those trees. And when I went to pay him, I asked him for a Social Security number to pay him. And he said, really, I really want you to make the check out to my mom. And I said, well, why? I said, you know, I need to withdraw Social Security earnings and the FICA taxes on what I'm paying you, because this is labor. And come to find out, 3 years prior to that, he'd fallen out of a tree and broken his ankle and was on full disability, but had been working the last 3 years after his ankle healed. And nobody from Social Security ever contacted him. He was still collecting, and he knew if he reported the income, and he was making about $50,000 a year trimming trees, that in fact he would not continue to collect this money. Well, he didn't deserve the money. He was no longer disabled. So we have the problem of continuing disability that's not reviewed. We have the problem of putting people on disability that aren't, all putting at risk the people who are truly disabled in this country for what we have promised and should be there to supply to them. I thank you for hearing me.